Alright, what's up everybody? I haven't done a video like this in a long time. I know my webcam doesn't have the best quality, but I figured this is the sort of thing that I should do, where you can see my face, you can see the expression. So today, I want to talk a little bit about gender and my personal experiences or lack thereof regarding it, because I get a lot of questions in chat, or not a lot, but a few every now and again when I'm streaming. You know, why did you say this? Or why did you say that? Um, so I just want to quickly say at the start of the video, look, I'm not an expert when it comes to this stuff. I I like to think I keep myself as well informed as possible, and I try to be understanding of everyone's experiences, but ultimately, some of the stuff I say in this video you're probably not going to agree with, and that's okay. Everybody has a different take, a different way of walking their life, and that's fine. But this is my experience, and I wanted to touch on that, and also maybe, give some context as to why I feel certain ways. I also saw a video on YouTube from our our personal favorite, Ben Shapiro. I know everyone loves him. And I sort of wanted to, I guess, clap back at it a little bit, just to, talk about why I disagree with some of the things that he's saying. Not really to rag on him necessarily, but just because I think giving the contrasting view and then explaining why I disagree with that and why my experience is different makes a lot more sense than to just tell you what I think. It's a format that I find, more personally fulfilling. So to start off with, introduction, I have recently come to understand about myself, or, come to identify as non-binary. Now, what does that mean? Clearly I was born, with male genitalia. I present masculine. I have a male-sounding voice. So how could I possibly be anything other than a man? Well, I personally do not believe that I experience gender at all. And, I'll touch on more of that later, but essentially, I'm fine with people using he pronouns, she pronouns, whatever they're comfortable with to refer to me. I don't really like they, but that's for personal reasons that are not relating to gender at all. I have no issue with they as a singular pronoun, it just doesn't work for me. Um, that's my personal experience once again. Um, but yeah, so that's sort of where I'm coming from. Now, what does all this mean? Well, it's sort of hard to explain exactly what I mean without giving some more context first, but I came to sort of realize that when people would use like traditionally female gendered terms of endearment, like, queen, sis, mommy even, I actually didn't mind it. I found it to be complimentary, and that was because to me, and this is again just the way I personally perceive those words. They didn't feel like they had a gender attached to them. Now, pronouns obviously he, she, they are gendered. Like that's kind of the point of them, and we'll touch more on that later as well. But those words I saw more as a collection of meanings, a collection of connotations, and I liked the connotations that, are attached to them. You think of a mother. What is a mother, connotatively? Well, she's caring, she's compassionate, etc. So if someone's calling me mom, that's a compliment. Um, and I spent a long sort of time trying to figure out, well, why do I take this as a compliment? Shouldn't my masculinity be offended or something? Is it just that I'm, not toxically masculine? Is it just that I'm, fairly secure of myself as a man? Well, not really, because I don't really strongly identify with being considered a man either. I'm just me. I'm Greg. That's who I am. So, sort of a long time coming, I eventually decided, look, I don't really understand gender, and I think that's because I don't experience it. Um, and to identify myself as being outside of that makes me happier, and it allows me a way of interacting with the world that I find brings me, a happier life and makes me feel better. So, that's the perspective I'm coming from with all of this, and hopefully through the rest of this video, I can sort of start to explain to some of you who might be a little confused, what I mean by that, and also, I guess, shed some light on, some of the things that I think a lot of people get wrong. And, for a lot of you, this is probably stuff you already know, already agree with, but I wanted to use what little of a platform I have to sort of get my thoughts on this out there, because I see a lot of things like this video that I'm about to play, and I hear opinions like it a lot, and so I wanted to, sort of explain why I disagree. So let's get into it. I will put a bit of a warning here. A lot of the stuff this guy says is pretty offensive to a lot of people. So, just watch at your own, what's the word, discretion. You can maybe skip ahead. It's about a 4.5 minute video, so I'm just going to play the whole thing. I'm not going to talk over it. If you want to skip 4.5 minutes ahead, you can go. So the video is called Nothing But the Facts. Ben Shapiro triggers leftist with basic biology facts. So you can already tell, I don't agree with this video at all, but I think it's a good point to talk off of. So I'm just gonna, get into it.
We cannot fully identify a gender of a person right when we see them, so therefore, I believe that it is not within my own individual liberty to gender that person.
Here's my problem with that particular argument. The answer is that in 99.8%, 99.9% of cases, you absolutely can gender somebody based on looking at them. Like, really. If you're going to use intersex people as an example of not being able to do that, this does not obviate the biological duality of sex upon which all progeneration is based for all of human history and for all mammalian species. So intersex people do not invalidate the concept of sex as a generality. Intersex people are people who have a biological anomaly. And by the way, in most cases of intersex, those people still manifest as either a male or a female. So the idea that intersex exists does not invalidate the idea that there is a male and that there is a female, or that in nearly all cases, I can tell the difference between a male and a female. Again, I'm not saying, by the way, that if you can show me your chromosomal charts that you are actually not a male, when I say that you're a male, that I should stick with that biological objective standard. Like my perception of you, in other words, is subject to my correct enunciation of an objective standard. So the objective standard, here's the deal. For all of human history, there was an objective standard between male and female. It was, for nearly all of human history, out of partial ignorance and partially because this is usually true, it was out of simply looking at people's genitals and assessing them based on their outward appearance. Right, which is still true for nearly all human beings on planet Earth at all times. Okay. What was that?
You can't really describe someone without secondary sex characteristics and gender them into something.
Well, I mean, you can based on primary sex characteristics if you can see their genitals. Doctors do this literally at birth all the time, right? So this is but your point is correct. If somebody was male dressed as a female and I misgendered them and then they said, "Oh, look, I'm male," zip, right? Then I would say correct, and then correct. I would say, for all of human history, you were male. Now the standard is chromosomal, right? It's the SRNY gene and all of this. There is some objective standard, in other words, by which we can determine sex. The problem I have with the transgender argument is that people are arguing that there is no objective standard, that no objective standard exists by which I can determine sex. And in fact, sex is completely subjective. I can determine my own gender based on no biology and, in fact, in abeyance of biology. I can have every single biological characteristic of a male, and if I say I am female, then I am female. This is anti-scientific nonsense. There is not a biologist worth their salt on planet Earth who would say that sex does not exist.
Yeah, I agree.
So if sex exists, then what are the characteristics of sex? And the problem with biological anti-realism or scientific anti-realism, as you're suggesting, is that there is no actual standard of sex, that it's completely malleable.
I'm not saying that sex is malleable. I'm saying there is male and female biologically. That is true, yes.
Right.
But I'm saying that gender is a spectrum. I'm saying that there is at least male, female, and non-binary because of this strange.
And what I'm saying is that there's a word game that goes on when people discuss gender. Because if we are talking about certain characteristics to which we attribute to masculine or feminine, if you want to say that there's a genetic male with feminine characteristics, we're fine. That's a male with feminine characteristics. Fine. That's fine. I mean, okay. So you're a man with feminine characteristics. That's cool. Who cares? Okay, but that doesn't make you a woman. In other words, if you're going, what we are now doing is we're playing a semantic game where we say a male with feminine characteristics is a woman. That's nonsense. Or a woman with male characteristics, masculine characteristics, is a man. That's nonsense too. And by the way, it actually ends up misgendering a lot of people who are just butch women or effeminate men. Right? So in other words, by trying to separate out gender and sex completely, and then by using terms like male and female or woman and man that are innately connected to sex, what you are doing is deliberately, not you, what people are doing is deliberately confusing the issue such that you get idiocies like Ilhan Omar writing to the Powerlifting Association of the USA saying that a transgender woman who is a biological male should be able to compete against biological women because it is a myth that men can pick up heavier objects than women. That is not a myth, that's called science. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So, I have a lot of issues with this video, and I'm not going to address all of them here. We're going to discard the sort of transgender in sport argument completely, because I don't think that's something that I'm educated enough to talk about. We're also going to, for the sake of argument, concede everything he says about biological sex entirely. We're purely going to focus on gender. So the first thing I think is important to do is to discuss the etymology of gender. This is a dictionary from 1828. I found the oldest dictionary I could online, and it reads, gender, to be born, blah blah blah, from the same root, etc., properly kind, sort. There is a short definition, a sex, male or female, but it is followed by hence, in grammar, a difference in words to express distinction of sex, usually a difference of termination in nouns, adjectives, and participles to express the distinction of male and female. But although this was the original design of different terminations, yet in the progress of language, other words having no relation to one sex or the other came to have genders assigned to them by custom. So essentially what that is saying is the original definition of gender was purely grammatical. It was talking about words like he, she, in other languages, like in French, using like what are my French words? Oh and Dieu. You know, or like different conjugations of words depending on gender. It was a purely grammatical definition, right? Now, fast forward to 1989. This is a word called a book called Webster's Dictionary of English Usage, right? So this isn't actually a dictionary, but more so a commentary on the evolution of words. So we get to gender. The use of gender to mean sex has been cited with disapproval in books on usage for many years. Fowler, 1926, seems to have been first to raise this issue, and his remarks are typical. Gender is a grammatical term only to talk of persons or creatures of the masculine or feminine, meaning the male or female sex, is either a jocularity, permissible or not according to context, or a blunder. The grammatical gender denotes a subclass of words that is usually partly based on sex that determines agreement with other words or grammatical forms. For example, a French noun of the feminine gender, such as femme, woman, takes the definite article la, while a noun of the masculine gender, such as fits, son, or sorry, fille, I imagine that's pronounced, takes le. As many commenters point out, sex does not always enter into it, blah 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 blah. You get the idea. It is generally agreed upon that it is a purely grammatical word since 1989. Or 1926, sorry. Fast forward to now, and I think an important thing to note here, language evolves. You know, anyone would be an idiot to argue otherwise. That is the point of language. It evolves to fit the current day and describe things and convey points across. So fast forward to today's definition. We have the grammatical definition still, a subclass within a grammatical class, such as a noun, pronoun, adjective, or verb, of a language that is partly arbitrary, but is also partly based on distinguishable characteristics, determines agreements within a selection of other words and grammatical forms, grammatical form, inflection form, blah blah blah. 2. The sex sense. And then part B, the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one sex. Now, I think this is the most important definition here. We are talking about the behavioral, cultural, and psychological traits that are typically associated, but not always. The word typically is key in this sentence. Typically associated with one, presumably, biological sex. So, this makes a clear distinction between the word sex and the word gender. What this is basically saying is gender is the subjective, behavioral side of sex. Now, you could say that 90%, whatever the number is, I'm not sure, a majority of people, their gender conforms to their biological sex, and you would be right. For the majority of people, that is true. However, it is very clear that gender does not mean biological sex. So I think this is, important to make this distinction. Gender, as I understand it, is a word to describe someone's experience, right? So, as gender norms fall, as, the woman of the house isn't seen to be someone who does all the housekeeping, raises the kids, blah, 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 as, a man isn't seen to be some emotional brick wall, who brings home food and money, blah, blah, blah. As that starts to fall, the word means less and less. I think that's apparent given the definition that we're using here. So, you could make an argument that if we abolish gender norms entirely, if we get rid of these standards that are set for people, gender becomes irrelevant. And, there is an argument to be had there. So, that is definitely something that maybe we could talk about in a future video. Like, I'd want to do some research first and, make sure I'm speaking from a place of being at least somewhat informed. But we are not in that world yet. So, if you are born with male genitalia, you are born, assigned male at birth, let's say, and you really like playing with dolls. You really like, brushing your hair, dressing up pretty, all that sort of stuff. The very, very typical story of, the childhood of someone who is a trans woman, right? Well, not very typical, but the stereotypical story, I should say. I think it's pretty clear that based on the definitions of gender that we've been given, that you are, in fact, a woman. Because, again, man and woman are words that talk about gender, not sex. And we've clearly established here that gender refers to the behavioral, the cultural, the psychological side of the sort of male-female, man-woman duality, right? So it is pretty clear that if you are displaying all of those characteristics, then you in fact would fall on the woman side of the sort of gender equation. And I'm not saying that everyone who is that way has to identify as a woman by any means. I would never say that, but just for the sake of argument here, that is the way that the word is being used today. That is the definition of the word gender in the dictionary, right? So, what does this mean? I think what it essentially means is that we are using gender to describe a person's experience, to describe what a person feels, as opposed to using it to describe something that is purely scientific and objective. Now, for me personally, I identify as non-binary. I believe I am agender or genderless or whatever. I I would be completely fine with anyone telling me you are biologically male, therefore I will choose to use he pronouns. He pronouns I don't mind in the first place, and I am biologically male. I see myself as being that. I guess I've never taken a genealogy test or anything to check my chromosomes. Maybe I could be intersex without realizing it, but that's besides the point. Um, I would personally take no issue with that. Some people would, and that's fine and valid, whether it's because they don't want to be reminded or, whatever other reason. But to say that because I am biologically male, that means that my gender is also male is inherently wrong. Um, you could make an argument that because a lot of the traits I portray are masculine, that means that my gender is that of a man. But the issue I take with that is the, I guess, intent, the driving force. To me personally, that is what gender is about. So I do not have a beard because I see myself as a man and want to portray as masculine. I have a beard because I like it, because that is how I see myself. I see myself as a person with a beard, right? I do not work at a timber yard because it's a masculine profession. I work at a timber yard because it's the job I got and I like it, right? So the motivations behind these things are completely removed from gender. And I will similarly do feminine seeming things or things that people would identify as being feminine at times. I tell my coworkers I love them. That is not something that your traditionally masculine person would do. But it's just how I act. I can be playful in ways that would not generally be ascribed to your traditional man. And again, there is no gendered motivation behind any of this. So for me, identifying as non-binary was freeing because it no longer feels like I have to conform to the binary in terms of my actions. I can do what I want. So even if, for whatever reason, it turns out to be inaccurate, if the way I perceive gender or understand gender, I guess, more to the point, is wrong, that's fine, because identifying this way makes me feel better. It frees me to live my life in a way that I find more fulfilling. So that's my personal experience, right? So the last point that I wanted to touch on, and this is purely to explain my experience, was an article I found about 7 genders. Now, I'm not saying there's only 7, and I don't even agree with a lot of this article, but it did mention something that I found personally to, describe my own experience well. So I'm going to focus on, you know, 2 things, but first I just wanted to make clear what the article's about. You can look it up if you're interested. So this is sort of the headline of the article, I guess. Through these conversations with real people, Benestad has observed 7 unique genders: female, male, intersex, trans, non-conforming, personal, and unique. Right? That's the I guess the what's the word? The opinion of the article. There's like an actual essay writing word term for that, but I can't think of it. So we're skipping ahead to personal. Pronouns etal. I don't know how to actually pronounce that. Al. Something like that. This paragraph I personally identified with very strongly. When Benestad asked Oscar what Oscar's gender was, Oscar simply responded, "I'm Oscar." Though fully presenting as a lady with a visible bulge, Oscar wanted to be referred to as he. A personal gendered individual is someone who identifies as themselves. Oscar engenders himself with his own name and pronoun of choice. It is not a political statement, but rather one that it requires an introduction, because in order to properly address Oscar, one must first know Oscar's name. A personal gendered individual relies only on their self to be validated as such. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff after this that is somewhat interesting. For as long as I can remember, I've been discussing questioning and considering gender, where in our recent generational past, it's been weighted at the female and male poles. I've watched it shift beautifully, prismatically towards the scatter-plotted center, towards the personal, towards the individual, self-defining, authentic remixing of all the codifiers. As we refine and draw out the character, blah blah blah, I'm most compelled by a well-defined balance and a strong point of view. For example, there's graceful lines and unadorned details that form the mainstay. Yeah, it goes on. But to me, that defines my experience perfectly. Maybe not the part about presenting as a lady, I don't, clearly, but the personal gender in this particular blurb. Now, I'm not saying I want everyone to favor using my name instead of pronouns. That's not. Oh, I forgot to transition the scene. Whoops. This is the blurb I was talking about. My mistake. Anyway, I'm not saying I want everyone to use my name instead of pronouns. I'm fine with he and she pronouns. It's totally cool. I'm just saying, to me, this resonates. I am not a man, I am not a woman, I'm not even a non-binary individual. I'm Grig. That's who I am. That is myself, my whole, my experience. I don't want to be confined by the label of man, or the label of woman, or the label of this, that, or the other. That is my personal, understanding of myself. I am Grig. So yeah, I hope some of this was food for thought. I'm rambling at this point, pretty clearly. This video has been going for half an hour. If anybody has watched it all the way through, props. If anyone has any questions, takes any issue with anything I've said, I'm completely open to discussion. I want to talk about this. I want to expand my horizons and learn more and understand more about other people's experiences. But yeah, I really just wanted to make a proper video addressing the subject, explaining exactly what I mean when I say I'm non-binary, explaining why I might say things, refer to myself as a girl sometimes, refer to myself as, this, that, or the other. It's because I don't see my gender as being fluid, I just don't see it as relevant, so I will use whatever term I feel fits the current situation. So an example that showed up in chat today, someone said that they were staying awake to watch my stream or something like that, and I said something like, man, you sure know how to make a girl blush. Really simple, but they got confused. They were like, what? Make a girl blush? What do you mean? Are you trans now? And I was like, no. But it felt more appropriate to me at the time to say that than to say make a guy blush. It just, to me, in my mind, that was the word that fit at the time. And I'm not saying only women or only girls can blush. Obviously, men can blush. I've seen it happen plenty of times, but again, it's not about gender or anything along those lines. I'm just using the word that feels apt to me as I'm using the word, if that makes sense. But anyway, yeah, I hope this video is received well. I hope everyone understands what I'm trying to say. Again, if you have any questions, if you have any issues you want to raise with me, feel free. I'm an open book, mostly. Yeah. I hope you are all having a lovely day, lovely month, lovely year. Um, you know, peace.